What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing dream demons. Throughout the history of mankind and humanity, sleep and dreams, oftentimes nightmares, have absolutely fascinated us. I myself did a whole book about shadow people and sleep paralysis and talked a lot about what's said to happen to us while we're asleep and experiencing either nightmares or dreams, both from a spiritual and scientific angle. Dreams have held a very prominent place in myths, legends, and folklore for basically as long as we've been able to wonder about those types of things. So I was thinking about it, and it struck me as kind of odd that even now in our modern times, dreams and sleep still have virtually no definitives behind them, and everything is still really speculative. There are no real, concrete, or agreed upon reasons as to why we sleep or why we dream. However, with that being said, there's something that remains very constant and consistent that's being reported, and that's the presence of what's sometimes called dream demons. They're usually very hostile and appear either in our nightmares and dreams themselves or immediately upon us waking up, and they do nothing but watch, terrify, and oftentimes torment us while they're there in whatever form. So, what I wanted to talk about a little bit today is whether or not these things really exist. Are they lurking just at the edges of our subconscious minds from the fringes of the shadow world they cling to? Or is there a perfectly reasonable and rational explanation for even some of this? So I've decided to delve just a little bit deeper into the realm of so-called dream demons and see if we can't figure out what's happening when we encounter them. As someone who knows that they are very much very, very real entities, even if they aren't present every time someone thinks they are. So with all that being said, let's jump right in. Many of you send me messages, talk to me in the live streams, and even comment under my videos about dreams or nightmares you've all had where you're dealing with some sort of dangerous and terrifying entity or something like that. Now, before we go any further, I should say that there is a very big distinction that needs to be made between dreams and nightmares, and I really do get kind of agitated when people don't make that distinction. A dream is something that we either aspire to in our lives or a good and pleasant experience we have when we're sleeping. A nightmare is, well, it's a nightmare, right? I don't need to tell you guys how bad nightmares can be sometimes. However, for the sake of keeping things simple, I will be referring to these as dream demons instead of nightmare creatures throughout this video, but trust me, I am speaking of one and the same. It's just easier this way. Stories of and myths about dream-dwelling apparitions and nightmarish entities can be found all across cultures throughout the entire world. That's one of the main things I look for when investigating certain entities in the supernatural and paranormal realm of things. Can these things be independently verified by witnesses who are completely and totally respective of one another? That's the key, at least in my opinion. I say that all the time too. Thousands, possibly even millions of individuals, all who don't know one another, talking about experiences they've had with these things, and all of them, though they vary greatly, seem to encompass the same elements or themes altogether. So they don't know each other, but they're all hallucinating the same things. You know what I mean? Like, they all are reporting the same exact stuff. So they can't be commiserating and just making it up. Now, we aren't only specifically talking about those entities that we have come to know and call demons here either. The descriptions of the entities involved in this vary to the same degree and extent as the people coming forward with their own experiences and with them. Basically, there's no one single nightmare demon, and they don't all come from what we call hell either. In fact, nothing can be further from the truth with those two things. Just a few examples are the Baku of Japan, which means, quote, eater of dreams, end quote. In China, they have the fox spirits that walk in dreams, and in St. Lucia, there's the creepy kokoma, which takes the form of infants that beat their victims to death with teeny tiny little fists. I know some of you may laugh at that image, but really take a moment and consider what I just described to you all, okay? Babies are creepy AF sometimes, and I can't imagine being chased and unalived by one of them and their tiny little fists and drooling mouths as I'm sleeping, of all things. In Germany, there's the Trud or Alp, which are said to come to not only people, but their animals as well, and crush them to death under their weight and perhaps even the weight of their own evil. Most of us by now are aware of medieval Europe's old hags, which I spoke about at length in my book about shadow entities. These entities are of particular interest to me because they're directly connected to and associated with sleep paralysis episodes. They invade our dreams and immobilize us, holding us down so not only can we barely breathe, but so that we can't move either and are trapped in our own terror and incapable of stopping them or getting them off of us. There are actual demons, the incubi and succubi we are also mostly familiar with here on this channel, as they sexually assault their victims and feed off of our sexual energy. Guys, everything I just mentioned to you all here are just a very small few in the grand scheme of things. I've also told you time and again that it isn't just incubi and succubi that feed off of our sexual energy. And if you've ever had an experience when you were engaged in that type of act in your bed, meaning consensually with your partner or whoever, at night or otherwise, and you saw a creepy, shadowy, or even a demonic figure just lurking in the corner, staring out of the closet, or making its presence known from underneath your bed, you know exactly what I mean. It's any sort of intense energy. We just use fear or terror as the main example because it's the most intense lower vibrational emotion human beings have, even above anger, though not by much. In Anglo-Saxon and Old Norse, we have a creature whose name I can't pronounce, not even if I tried, but it basically translates to the word nightmare, and hence that's where the common use of that word comes from. So basically, and all that to say, though all of these creatures come from all different places and are witnessed by all types of different people, they are basically serving the same purpose and behaving in the same way. All across the world, the basic experience of encountering any of the above-mentioned entities is remarkably similar. The victim will partially awaken, usually in the middle of the night, but not always, and they're unable to move. Not only can't they move anything except their eyeballs, they feel as though they're being held down or even crushed by some unseen or unknown force. Something presses down on their chests, and it's accompanied by not being able to breathe, a sense of breathlessness, and sometimes they feel as though they're being choked or strangled by either that same force, or they literally feel hands around their throats while it's happening. In some cases, as we've already briefly discussed, they feel like they're being taken advantage of or violated sexually. In every single case, almost across the board, and no matter where it's being reported as having come from, there's a description of an entity of sorts or some sort of presence that has an incapacitating aura of malevolence and evil attached to it. The sense of dread and doom is overwhelming, and sometimes there's more than just one or two entities. I've seen reported on numerous occasions where people had groups of these things in their room with them when they woke up like that. Terrifying. Once the victim is aware enough of the entity, it can be found leering at them from the shadows or the very thing that's sitting on their chest or with its hands around their throat, causing the lack of being able to breathe. The entities are most of the time accompanied by strange and oftentimes rotting stenches that the victim can't identify, and even sometimes something that they have never smelled anything like it before. It's foul, guys. Trust me, and if you've never smelt it, you're lucky. If you've never experienced this, like I said, lucky you. But let me tell you, it's just like what you think would be the worst and most disgusting stench and smell in the world, multiplied by about 1 million, then you would have an idea of how bad and terrible these smells are. Not to spend too much time on this one detail, but it always seems as though the smell is centralized too. It's like it's in one small area of the room or somewhere nearby, not even all at once. Like it's there, it's not there, then it's there, it's not there. It's like little glimpses of scent or stench, if that makes more sense. A lot of the time there will be weird sounds like grunts, heavy breathing, and moaning coming from either the entity or entities themselves or somewhere else in the room where the victim isn't able to see at that moment or just somewhere else in general. And I would go so far as to say as well that sometimes the sounds, whispers, and voices aren't actually in the room at all, but being launched inside the person's mind. The smells, sights, and sounds are more potent than anything humans are used to in our usual and oftentimes average waking world. A psychologist and professor at Goldsmiths University of London named Chris French commented on the phenomenon saying, quote, "It is a very common experience, but typically people haven't heard of it. I have people calling me about it, and often they have the same story. They've been suffering and never told anyone because others would think they were crazy. In the whistles and bells version, people get a strong sense of a presence, and they may also get hallucinations. They may see dark shadows and lights and monstrous figures, or footsteps or mechanical sounds or voices. They may feel as if they are being dragged out of bed. It is absolutely terrifying. There is also intense fear. It doesn't have a dreamlike quality. It feels incredibly real," end quote. We've discussed some of the classic hallmarks of these types of attacks by these entities many times here on this channel, in pre-recorded videos like this one, in the live streams, and I've even discussed it at length in my third book as well. But for those of you who don't know anything about it or who just need a refresher course, let's go over some of them now. Mind you, every single experience with these so-called dream demons or paralysis entities is very different, even for as similar as they are. And for how exactly the same a lot of it seems to be. The reason for that isn't only the entities themselves and how they operate, but because we only have the stories told of the encounters through the lenses of each individual victim. Therefore, even those things that are the same across the board and all the time, everything is still a little bit different because of a human being's ability to uniquely perceive and receive information and what's happening to and around them. So it's about perception, how the person is personally experiencing it. And that's why it seems like a lot of the times the reports will maybe go off the rails or go off book, so to speak, from what's normally reported. But it's actually the same thing happening. It's just how the person's trauma, it's like the person's viewing it through the lens of their own trauma. So each individual experience will be filled with that person's own perspective and a lot of nuance, if that makes sense. The hallmarks we are discussing are very much present, and not only that, they remain very constant and consistent through these types of attacks across cultures and throughout the world. Most of the accounts I've come across and all of the experiences like this that I've personally had can only be described as harrowing, and that's to say the least. I came across one report that basically sums it up nicely, saying, quote, "I couldn't move a muscle. Something was in the room and walked across my bed. I tried to scream, but only a slight noise came from my throat. Whoever or whatever was in my room then disappeared. Unfortunately, I've been getting this horrible paralysis for about 2 months now. The last time it happened, I managed to open my eyes, but still could not move my body," end quote. I always thought that being unable to open your eyes during these attacks was an uncommon thing, but in researching for the third book and then again for this video, I learned that it's actually pretty common and happens more often than I ever imagined. I am always able to, at the very least, have my eyes open and move my eyeballs after opening my eyes, and I'm not at all saying that makes any of it easier to deal with or any better at all, just that at the very least I'm able to see, I guess. But in thinking about it a little further, I wonder if my eyes wouldn't open, if then I would be able to more easily convince myself that it was only a nightmare after all, and if that's the effect these entities are hoping for at the end of it. A 24-year-old woman named Helena Adelina came forward with her own encounter of a very menacing, extremely vivid, and very real figure that would not only immobilize her every single night during these so-called sleep paralysis episodes, but that would stalk her throughout her nightmares leading up to it. Eventually, she would have to start considering that what she was experiencing weren't just ordinary run-of-the-mill nightmares, but that there was something more to all of it. She said of her experience, quote, "He was a slim, tall figure, but with no features, like a silhouette. My sense was that he was terrifying, an ancient being, very dark and pure evil. Sometimes I would wake and not see him, but hear his voice in my ear talking about destruction, war, and death. Sometimes he would grab me around the ankles and drag me under the covers. I would be fighting it and struggling to breathe. Sometimes a woman would enter the scene, laughing and cackling. She would keep slapping me around the face and laughing and finding it all very amusing. And there would be a serious ringing in my ears. When I came out of it, my ears would be ringing very badly. At the time it was happening, it felt like it was going on forever. How long it actually went on for, I don't know," end quote. Now, guys, real quickly, I want to say here that I've discussed shadow entities and the Hat Man particularly at length here on this channel and privately with a lot of you as well. I've had my own thoughts and ideas, and I have some new things that I've learned from my own experiences with them and from my guides and spirit team that I've been talking about in some of the live streams. Being that the Hat Man possibly was once human, but that he's so ancient and has been dead for so long that he somehow became his own form of ancient evil. However, I'll talk about that more at another time, but that's what Helena's encounter made me think of. I don't know when she was experiencing this, but if you think about it, shadow people have only become a more well-known or mainstream phenomenon in the last decade or so. So it's not surprising that she wouldn't readily and easily identify that entity as one, because she probably didn't know that term yet at the time of her encounter. I could be wrong here because I don't know when she experienced all of it, but if I were to have to make a bet on it, I would go with that it happened before shadow people and the Hat Man became household names in the last decade or so. Skeptics love to say that it's simply something scientific, perhaps something neurological happening in the brain during certain phases and stages of sleep. However, like I said in the beginning, the witnesses vary too much by location, age, race, gender, sex, etc., and they all cannot be making up or imagining the same thing completely and totally independent of one another. To me, that sounds completely ridiculous, but maybe that's just because I know better. Let me know in the comments below. Does that sound reasonable to y'all? I would also like to hear what the skeptics and naysayers would have to say about the actual and very real physical effects these entities seem to have had on the victims during episodes as well. They also have a presence in the real world outside of the dreamer and their nightmares. Meaning, once you start experiencing sleep paralysis and having to deal with these entities, you more than likely will start seeing them at times when you're wide awake as well. And I know that's terrifying, but it has been proven in this community to be true. I can give countless examples of this as well, and I could also do a whole separate video on people who come to constantly and consistently see and have to deal with their dream demons in their waking hours, all hours of the day and night, and regardless of where they are or what they're doing. Sometimes other people will witness what's happening with the victim too. While it's true that a lot of the time if you're sleeping next to someone and start having a sleep paralysis episode or an encounter with a dream demon, the other person or people in the bed or room with you seem almost like they're unable to be woken up, like they physically can't witness what's happening. A lot of the time, though, I've come to realize the opposite is true. The sleeper will be witnessed being thrown around the bed or the room, beat up right before the eyes of terrified other person or terrified other people. And there's even times when bruises, scratches, and bite marks were witnessed appearing randomly and seemingly out of nowhere on the victim as people watched. So, for example, say you and your significant other are lying in bed and you're both sleeping. They suddenly start seeming like they're having the crap kicked out of them in their dreams, and so you try to wake them up, but you absolutely cannot. You're terrified, smelling a disgusting stench, and you yourself are feeling like you're in danger and like something is happening you don't have the capacity to understand. As you helplessly watch them struggle and cry out, you also see scratches, bites, and bruises just start popping up and appearing all over their body suddenly. Even though you sense something is in the room with you, you don't actually see anything, and I'm sure that that has to be almost as terrifying as it is for the person actually experiencing the ordeal in the first place. Even if no one's there to witness it, most people who have these sorts of experiences and encounters do wake up with strange marks all over their bodies afterwards. It doesn't happen every single time, but it does happen a lot. I'm talking about the kinds of injuries that cannot possibly have been self-inflicted, and even in some of the attacks by incubus demons, there's been tears in and around women's private areas that cannot be scientifically or medically explained. I found a report from a prisoner who came forward about his own encounter with a dream demon, and he says the whole thing was witnessed by his cellmate at the time. He said, quote, "The last time it happened, I was tossing and turning and trying to get to sleep when a strange dark power pulled me off the bed and pushed me against the wall. My cellmate screamed when he saw what was happening," end quote. His cellmate also came forward and corroborated his story, saying that the victim had been physically lifted off the bed and thrown against the wall. Apparently, he had given the matter a lot of thought and had been reluctant at first to believe what he was seeing with his own eyes, because he reiterated there was no way at all that the man had merely been able to throw himself against the wall from the bed or to assault himself like that. There are even some cases where the so-called visual hallucinations the victims experience are witnessed by other people too. And if that's the case, then how can they still be classified or described as quote-unquote visual hallucinations? Do you know how uncommon it is? How severely uncommon it is for multiple people to hallucinate the exact same thing at the exact same time, even if they're in the same room as one another? There are so many articles out there about this. I'm sure there is, about everything we've discussed and the witnesses to the victimization. But I want to bring your attention to one in particular now because I think it'll really be able to drive my point home. The article was written by Craig Hamilton Parker, and it was titled Demonic Possession, Attacks, and Sleep Paralysis. An elderly woman read the article and contacted him saying about it, quote, "I'm terrified at night as I believe that I'm being menaced by a ghost or spirit. If I awake during the night, I see what I would call smoke in my room. One night, my husband and I saw the harrowing sight of my bedclothes being slowly pulled off the bed. But the last straw was when I felt it move to the side of the bed and poke me hard in my arm. I prayed out loud, but it wouldn't go away," end quote. It's uncommon that I hear of someone praying, whether out loud or to themselves inside of their own heads, where it doesn't have the desired effect of making it all stop. However, I digress, and I do believe that woman in what she had to say. In another report from a website called Psychic Experiences, the witness talks about and describes an evil entity in his dreams that left behind physical changes in his real life and in the real world around him. If you're not yet convinced that something supernatural is going on here, then I don't know what will convince you. This man's nightmare contained a shape-shifting entity that actually told the victim its name. Well, it had two names that it wanted to go by, and we've actually discussed this case here on this channel before in one of my other videos, so I'll just kind of summarize it all here for you now. The names it claimed were Lilin and Gamagan. The nightmares were intense, and in them the entity brought the victim to a house he had never been in or seen before that was full of strangers he had never met before. The victim continued telling his own story by saying, quote, "It's an apartment filled with strangers who were waiting on me but wouldn't tell me why. Then fear strikes when it occurs to me this guy who brought me here is a demon. He then tells me the women in the room want my soul, and he's brought me to them, that it was his job to give it to them, and that by doing so, he would be allowed back into hell. In my dream, I began to pray, which made the demon and the people in this place angry. The women came out from the room where they had been waiting on me, and they were witches. I showed them the gray streak in the front of my hair, which I have in real life, and I told them I was a witch too. So while they were confused, I tried to escape. At this point, I was finally able to wake myself up. I ended up falling back asleep and right back into the dream. This time, the demon came to me differently, but with the same goal of getting my soul so he could return to hell. I finally woke up and would not let myself go back to sleep. I looked up the names of the demons he gave me, which were actually real names to real Christian-based demons. I have previously never looked into any type of demonology, nor did I watch anything about it before I went to sleep. In fact, I have never heard of these names before, which scared me a little more. I have always been sensitive to spirits and energy, but never anything like this, nor anything that ever scared me this much. I will also add that about 2 years ago, my younger sister started dabbling in witchcraft and brought in a Ouija board and messed with that as well. I was not home during this time, and she has since moved out, but I fear she may have opened something she had no business to. Side note, the past few weeks I have had experiences with something cold on the back of my neck, the house being incredibly colder inside than temperatures outside, lights turning off and on for no reason, and weird unexplained noises," end quote. I'm sure this victim feels horrible enough as it is, so I'm not going to sit here and once again get into the dangers of messing with the Ouija board or any other occult tools right now, or even being in the general vicinity of people who are doing those types of things without proper training and knowledge, but I do talk about all of that at length here on this channel as well. I don't remember the name. I have more than 1,000 videos on this channel, guys, and I cannot remember which video I've discussed this particular case in, but I believe it was something to do with succubi, because I remember talking about Lilith, and so go back and look through my videos about demons and demonology, any type of specifically named demons, and I'll try to see if I can link that particular video that I think it is in the description box. Another really bizarre but perfectly normal, at least in the sense of what we are discussing here today, account of these entities affecting the physical world around their victim comes from a woman who says she was repeatedly visited, attacked, and assaulted by what seems to be a classic incubus entity. I found the article on ThoughtCo, and it was called Spirit Lovers, Incubus and Succubus Attacks. Just an aside about the title, I think it's horribly insensitive and inappropriate to refer to an incubus or any sort of sex demon as a lover, but maybe that's just me. This frightened and traumatized woman seemed to have been visited several times and tormented on a regular basis by a sex-crazed demon that not only victimized and abused her, but her daughter as well. This demon was able to move objects around, and when it did so, other people were able to see and witness it. She explained, quote, "My age is 47 and I am female. For about 6 years, my daughter and I felt walking on the bed and other surfaces that we slept on. My husband and my son thought we were nuts. It would happen while we were completely awake or even just getting into bed. The walking would be light and sometimes the bed would wave. A couple of times during that approximate 6 years, I would wake up to find something sexual happening. At that time, I would shake it away. My husband had been sick for the last 5 years, stroke and other complications, and this past December passed away. A few months before he died, I found him sitting on the side of the bed looking ashen. He had told me that something jumped on his bed. It had happened before, and he always blamed it on the cat, even though the cat was never in his room. This time, he believed and he was shaken. On August 1st, the entities were back in my bed, and this time I relented at a weak moment. I can't understand how I could have because the thought of it terrifies me. The first few times my heart was beating like a drum. Once it started, it never ended. I developed an insatiable appetite for sex and didn't stop thinking about it 24 hours in the day. Neither did they. I rationalized that it was friendly spirits of the universe, but I knew in the back of my mind differently. For 3 days, going on 4, I had constant sex. They did not enter for long, and then the next one would come, and I could not get enough. Literally, I couldn't function normally. The turning point came today. I was at work, and something that was cold enveloped me, starting at my feet and ending behind me. My hands, which were trying to type at the time, were frozen in place, if not paralyzed. The thing seems to scare the others away, like it had some power beyond theirs. It had sex with me while I was sitting in the chair, but it was different, more mellow and soft. It scared me tremendously because it was outward and not inward like the others. This is all going to wear me down if I don't find some serious help. This is all true, end quote. I don't doubt that it is. And I want to say to this victim, if you should ever happen to come across this channel, I don't know that I can help you, but it's not your fault, so don't take guilt on. You know, a lot of people that have these types of experiences, let me just say, you can't control how your body reacts to something, okay? And leave it at that, because I also don't want to get demonetized, so. And guys, I've talked about this encounter on this channel a long time ago as well, and here's the thing I really want to drill into people's heads about these types of attacks. Like I said, it isn't our fault. And I do think it was an incubus and succubus video, and I'm going to link that one in the description box. A lot of the time we are to blame for bringing or inviting this evil into our lives, and sometimes even our beds. But we normally, most of the time, do so inadvertently, okay? Sure, there are people who invite them in on purpose, but in the case of the woman and her daughter, it was probably an accident and caused by grief and or a number of other things going on with her at the time. I don't know her or what could have been happening in her life, but I am confident enough in my knowledge of what brings these things to us that I say what I just said confidently and without having to put too much thought into it. It isn't our fault. And one of the whole points is to get human beings to sin regardless of how a demon is doing so. That's their job. So no one should be blaming themselves for these things at all. And I hope this woman and her daughter have found peace and a way to at least live with what's happened to them. I hope they've since moved on from this and gotten the help that they deserve and needed. There are so many reports, just like all of the ones in this video, that I could sit here for a month straight just going through them and still not make a dent in the pile of them, so to speak. When a witness comes forward, they are always able to describe what happened to them in great detail and very vividly. It mostly happens when the victim is either asleep or partially awake, but yet they're fully aware of what's going on and of what's happening to them. So, what do we make of all of this? It really depends on your own beliefs and also, as always, on your own experiences. I'll let MU sum it up for us, and then I would love to see what you all have to say about it in the comments. MU says, quote, the official scientific explanation is that this is all due to a natural phenomenon known as sleep paralysis, a sleep disorder which various studies have estimated around 20 to 40% of the population, possibly more, will experience at some point in their lives. The whole thing works like this. When we sleep, we enter a phase of sleep called the REM stage, or the rapid eye movement stage, which is accompanied by the eyes moving very quickly back and forth under the eyelids. It is at this stage where dreams come to us, and to keep our bodies from acting out on what we are seeing or doing in this dream world, they release a neurotransmitter called glycine and a nerve receptor in the voluntary muscles called GABA, which effectively paralyzes us. In most cases, these chemicals will have dissipated by the time we wake up, but in some instances, they can still be active even when the brain wakes up either fully or partially during REM sleep, keeping your motor functions inhibited even as you are awake. In essence, when this happens, you become fully aware of your surroundings, yet you are still partially immobilized by your own body. According to this theory, the sense of a malign presence or spiritual attacker or apparition is the brain's desperate attempt to explain to itself what's going on, eventually conjuring up these subliminal images of evil entities, demons, and ghosts. The disorder has been used to explain everything from dream demons to poltergeists to alien abduction and even demonic possession, and supernatural explanations of this supposed phenomenon go back centuries. While this is the scientific and rational explanation, there is little knowledge of how this actually works or what it entails, and it remains very poorly understood. Of course, despite this attempt to write this all off as misfiring brain chemistry and derailed sleep cycles, it is hard to reconcile this with some of the reports that describe actual physical symptoms of attack, effects on the real world, or episodes witnessed by other people, complete with inexplicable physical phenomena such as moving objects. There are also those who insist that what they have encountered is not the result of mere hallucination or fierce nightmares, but rather something more, something with malignant will, intent, and intelligence of its own. An article called Dark Side of Lucid Dreams by Ryan Hurd explains that there could be much more to such entities than just hallucinations, saying thus, quote, the class of nightmares seems not to be merely reflections of fear, but to have an autonomous energy all its own. There's intelligence in the eyes of the dream figures, and they don't like to be told that they are a symbol of some walking life fear or that they are not real. They have their own story to tell, but we often don't know how to listen. Yet. Throughout history, people have been haunted by such nocturnal dream-invading specters. Is this all the result of the tricks of the human brain during sleep, or could there be something more to some of these accounts? If there are indeed at least some cases that go beyond the sleep paralysis explanation, then what could these entities be and what do they want? Whatever the answers may be, this is a universal phenomenon that has gone on since time unremembered, virtually unchanged across cultures and geographic boundaries, and only reasserts that there is much about sleep and dreams that we have yet to fully understand. End quote. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, and if you watched in the premiere and enjoyed hanging out with one another, please spread the love by sharing this video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure your notification bell is turned on. Even if you think you're subscribed, go back and make sure, because sometimes something glitchy happens with YouTube and you end up not being subscribed even to your favorite channels. And I know I'm one of your favorites. I mean, obvi. Guys, check out the description box for some important links. The links to all of my books on Amazon, Kindle, paperback, and Audible version of Missing the Faith Theory, Encounters with Evil, 101 True and Terrifying Stories, Shadow Entities, Sleep Paralysis, and Beyond, Danger at Your Door, Terrifying Encounters with Black-Eyed Kids, Midnight Visitors, Stories of the Black-Eyed Children, Campfire Stories Volume 1, and Campfire Stories Volume 2. All but the last two that I mentioned there are available on Audible as well. If you've purchased any of my books, read any of my books, please go to Amazon and give 5 stars and give a great review, please. It really helps push the books up so that they're more seen and so that they stay in a higher position longer and I sell more copies, which is the overall idea of it all, right? Also in the description box, you will find the tentative normal schedule for the channel. The 2 pre-recordeds, once at 11 a.m. Eastern on Monday and one at noon p.m. Eastern on Monday. The live stream on Wednesday nights with Ghost Dragon ZW. The live stream every other Thursday with the Paranormal Pixie. Live Intuitive Oracle and replays with Ghost Dragon ZW, where he reviews my old videos. on either Friday or Saturday. They kind of switch. In the next coming weeks, Live Intuitive Oracle is just going to be on Friday and his replays are going to be on Saturday. But until then, unless something comes up, you can find the schedule in the channel. Hit me up if you want autographed copies of any of my books, GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. And also, if you want to discuss anything, if you want to talk about anything, it does take me a little longer to get back to emails than most people, just because who I am as a human being. But if you need something, hit me up. If you want an autographed copy of the book, if you want to send me for listener encounters, your encounters with the supernatural, paranormal, extraterrestrial, or otherworldly. I feel like I cannot think straight and I'm just like stuttering through this ending, so I'm just going to end it here. Ways to donate to the channel: PayPal, Cash App, Amazon wish list gift link also in the description box. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If nobody told you today, I believe in you. I got your back. You're amazing. You're wonderful. You can do anything you put your mind to. And if you don't believe in that, then you're really not going to achieve much. You have to believe in yourself. And again, if you need someone to tell you that they believe in you, this girl right here does, because I believe in every single one of you. I believe in the potential of humanity and of human beings individually. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.